when you're looking at the latest mall shooting or church shooting, or King Soopers shooting, and you ask yourself where this all started. It started in January 1958. Yes. I'll make the case for that. It's my theory, okay? It's my philosophy, and I can back it up. Doesn't mean it's the truth. Nothing I say factually in terms of Carol's guilt or innocence. That's my analysis. That's my take. And when I started, just for the record, I was completely neutral. I could have gone either way. For me, it's a good story, good book, either way, guilt or innocence. I go into the simplicity of life at that time. It's often characterized as though that's a dream. The 50s really weren't that way. For white middle America, they were that way. At least for me in Lincoln on South 24th Street. You could smoke on an airplane. There were no, doctor's offices had ashtrays in them. There was no seatbelts in cars. The big impact was the economic impact. The war was over. It had been won. We had the strongest army, the strongest economy the world had ever seen. The vets were now out of college. They'd come back through the Best Education Act. They were coming to cities. We had suburbs starting as a result. 2-car garages, more education. Still, it was still hooked into that belief that life was safe and stable if you played it right. If you worked hard, if you went to church, if you took care of your parents, you mowed your lawn, all that was going to lead you to the desired end, which was a decent life. Evil was not something that came unexpectedly. You saw it. Killings were not random. They were usually as a result of some animosity or some antagonism or some grudge or robbery or theft. They were 85% of killings were done in 1958. They were domestic killings. The idea of a random killing was not part of the culture, not part of the modern American culture. If you go back 50, 60 years, you'll find some, but it was not part of the modern American culture that death could come randomly at you for no reason. That was the setup of the trauma. And the lack of safety that resulted from the fact that you could be killed, your kids could be killed, you could be in your garage right now. That's what set up the fear in that 8-day rampage that he went on. The world was no longer a safe place. Even if you lived it right and played by the rules, you could still go down and not get back up. So what happened? I'll go through it briefly. Charlie, 19 years old, third member of a 7-child family, 5'4", bow-legged, spoke with a lisp, didn't see well. Met Carol when he was 17 years old. He was mocked mercilessly through school, at Sunday school, playground, in day school. It was relentless. And this isn't something that I'm repeating from stuff I've read. I've talked to people who were there when they saw this happen after Sunday school. He would be mocked about his legs and his hair. So that's Charlie. And of course, there's a shift in his personality when he comes home one day, and students are pouring this painting out of his hands, painting of his mother that he made for his mother, and ripped it up, and he comes home and he's crying. His dad says, "Did it happen again?" He said, "Yeah." He says, "If it happens again, knock the devil out of him." And that's what he started doing. Days after that, you know the story. It got worse and it got worse and it got worse. And he was picking fights with people twice his size and beating him up or getting beat up. It didn't really make any difference. So that's the kind of setup for Charlie. Carol, 12 when she met Charlie, 14 at the time of the rampage, January 1958, came from a violent household. Her dad was a twice convicted pedophile, alcoholic, never held a job, beat the mother up. No evidence that he beat the children up or abused them, but that doesn't mean he did. It's never saw each other. So, finally, she went to 6 schools in 5 years. You're setting up a very unstable person at home, not being able to attach to anybody, moving constantly. And when they meet, Charlie senses this vulnerability in her. Whether it's conscious or not, I don't know. It begins his process of basically taking over her personality. The rampage, so they've been going together about a year and a half in January 1958. The rampage starts on Tuesday, January 21st, when Charlie murders her mother, her stepfather, and her little sister. The issue here is this has been glossed over in so many tellings of the story. Carol was there. Of course she was there. What do you base that on? Well, I mean, they were together. I mean, it's like you don't get much of an answer. But that's the assumption out there, is that she was there. If she was there, the story goes down this track. If she was not there, it goes down this track. It's an absolutely critical fact. You cannot assume it and understand what happened afterwards in any logical, realistic fashion. You have to decide that. And I decided that she wasn't there. Again, I won't go through the analysis. It's in the book. I stand by it. It just does not make sense. Forget her explanation of what happened, forget her rationalization, her story. It doesn't make sense logically that she was there when Charlie killed her mother, her father, her stepfather, and her sister. It just doesn't hang together, and it make that case for us. Of course, if she wasn't there, then that sets up the hostage defense, right? If she was there, the hostage defense is a joke. And she's also a monster. If she was there, if she saw this happen and lived in the same house and watched TV for the next 5 days after Charlie murdered her little sister, what does that make her as a human being? So the hostage defense kind of gets her in trouble because it's not kind of totally believable on its face. Charlie says, I've got your parents and the gang's got them. If you're trying to run away, I'm going to kill them. You have to look at the fact that it's a 14-year-old girl. Charlie has a gun in her face. They both say that. So that's what she claims, is that I was a hostage. I didn't know they were. If she knew they were dead, then she had to run, right? She had no reason not to run. Where Carol gets convicted in court of public opinion is that she didn't run when she had the chance to. TV had just hit fixed. 85% of the people in the country now had television in 1958. So you had an unholy alliance of television and violence started with Charlie Starkweather. This is the first one where it came into your living room. I mean, you used to be able to just see Charlie's picture in the paper, or the radio talk about it. Now, he could be in your living room as he's leaving the courtroom, walking with 2 deputies to his car. You could see him. You could see Carol as she was taken from the prison down to the courthouse. And every time it's repeated. The pictures are incredibly powerful. This is the first instance where we realized how powerful they were in general, and particularly with violence in particular, that it had a power that was seductive to the public, to the state. This was now violence in the public forum, out in the street, out where the world could see it. Is that what you see now? Well, what you saw initially was a romanticization of Charlie and Carol, like Bonnie and Clyde. And that started with the movie MacLeans. Martin Sheen played Charlie and Sissy Spacey played Gerald. It's the director, Terry Malick himself, called it a fairy tale. It does not give you the feeling of trauma and violence and suffering that those two people brought. And the other part of it is there, Charlie went out kind of laughing and snickering and waving his hand at people. So where's that? And here's his girlfriend. She's still in prison. And that kind of adds to the whole pull of the story. It starts to gain traction. And with that movie, and that Natural Born Killers is based on it. Bruce Springsteen's song came out in 1981, called Nebraska. Now it's called Nebraska. Further romanticized. If you listen to that song, it's very haunting. It's probably one of the most haunting songs I've ever heard. And I don't want to say you feel sympathy for Charlie, but you feel something for him. You feel a humanity, really, is what it is. And his suffering, which I'm not particularly comfortable feeling it. But that became so popular. Of course, Charlie, there's this line about, I wouldn't mind going to the chair as long as Carol's on my lap, sitting on my lap, which I determined he said. A bunch of other people say it. Lawyer said it, Dad said it. I looked into it, determined that, in fact, Charlie said it to a reporter. Springsteen takes it and says, I don't mind going to the chair as long as my pretty baby is sitting on my lap. That's again the romantic spin on it. Pretty baby, that's a catchy little phrase, not just Carol. So that it kept getting this kind of romantic take on it. The books came out on it, which weren't particularly in depth on the issue of like Carol's guilt. They were mainly kind of assumed or passed over, so that made it easier. Stephen King was, some others said his bedroom was plastered all the walls with plastered pictures, John and Carol, and articles on the story. He says it himself. I don't read a lot of Stephen King, but I know in several books he mentions Starkweather, so kind of set up Stephen King. Starkweather, Charlie and Carol, everyone say, will always be a part of the American crime story. It will be a critical part, a fundamental part of it. I said, if you want to understand where we got today with mass murders, start with Charlie, because it was the first one where there were random killings. He wasn't mad at people. People killed him. Charles Whitman up in the tower in Austin, Texas, when he shot 20 people to death, he didn't know who they were. He wasn't mad at them. They were doing it for their own particular pathology. Speck murdered 8 nurses. He didn't know them. He was never angry at them. He never acted angry. He didn't be like this. So this whole new trail, this whole new pathology of murdering for the sake of murdering people you don't even know, people you're not mad at, that starts with Charlie. And it kicks in, and you can track it. Starting with Whitman and then Speck and the Strangler and all those people. Some of the serial killers know, but the mass murderers, by and large, do not know who they're killing. They're not kicking it out on a particular individual. Charlie taught him that. To me, he said, look, all you guys, all you sociopaths in your basement, they're plotting all this stuff against your mother. You're going to poison her or whatever. Don't be disabled by your anger. Go out into the world and act it out. You'll feel better and you'll be famous. That's the lesson. That's the door that Charlie opened for mass murderers. Serial killers are a little bit different story. And that's the way I see it.